The elevator doors closed before I could say anything, and the sound of her voice, soft, tired, familiar, fell away like it always did, leaving me alone with words I'd carried for 20 years and never once let reach my mouth. Before we continue, drop your city and time in the comments, and thanks for listening to my story. Now back to the story. My hand was still raised like I was about to knock on a door that no longer existed. That was the moment I realized some loves don't end because they fade. They end because they wait. I didn't know it then, but that morning, gray Chicago rain streaking the windows, coffee burned, fluorescent lights humming overhead, was quietly rearranging the rest of my life. Not with a confession, not with a kiss, with silence. For 2 decades, she'd walked past my desk every weekday at exactly 8:42 a.m., sometimes early, sometimes late, sometimes smiling, sometimes hollowed out by things she never said out loud. And I watched, not in a dramatic way, not in a way that looked like love, just enough to know when something in her had shifted. I was there the day she came in wearing a ring she kept twisting around her finger like she wasn't sure it belonged to her yet. I was there the day she stopped wearing it. I never asked why. I never asked anything. That's the kind of love this was, the kind that doesn't interrupt. We worked on the 7th floor of a brick office building just off Michigan Avenue, one of those places that smelled like printer ink and old carpet, where the coffee was always terrible and the break room TV was permanently stuck on the Weather Channel. Accounting firm, mid-sized, forgettable. The kind of place where lives pass each other quietly while spreadsheets get finished and birthdays get remembered only if HR sends an email. Her name was Claire Donovan. Mine was Ethan Miller. Those names don't sound cinematic, they sound ordinary. And that's exactly what this was. Claire had this way of taking off her coat and draping it over the back of her chair like she was claiming territory without saying a word. She laughed with her whole face. Not loud, not attention-seeking, just real. The first time she spoke to me was over a missing file back in 2004. She leaned over the cubicle wall, brown hair slipping loose from its clip, and said, "Hey, you're the spreadsheet guy, right?" I nodded, because that felt safer than speaking. She smiled like that answer was enough. It always was. Over the years, we became work-adjacent close, not the kind that grabs drinks every Friday, the kind that knows how the other takes their coffee, the kind that notices when someone stops humming while they work. I learned her seasons without being invited into them. I watched her glow the year she got married, coming in flushed and happy, talking too fast, like joy was a secret she was scared might leak out if she slowed down. I watched that glow dull into exhaustion 5 years later, her shoulders always tight, phone always face down, eyes carrying weight they didn't used to. When she cried in the stairwell once, quiet, controlled, trying to make herself smaller, I stood at the landing above her and didn't go down. Not because I didn't want to. Because I knew if I did, she'd have to explain. And she wasn't ready. Love, for me, became an act of restraint. When the divorce happened, she didn't announce it. She just came in one Monday without the ring, and with a new stillness about her, like a house after movers leave. Someone else asked. She answered with a half smile and a shrug that said she was done telling the story. I brought her a coffee that morning without asking. Same order as always. She looked up at me, surprised, and said, "You remembered?" I nodded again. It was my specialty. Years stacked on top of years. The office remodeled twice. The company changed logos. People came and went. We stayed. She dated here and there. I knew because she came in wearing different kinds of hope, the fragile kind, the cautious kind, the kind that already knows how it ends. I stayed exactly where I was, not because I didn't want more, because I didn't want to cost her peace. There's a lie people tell about love, that if it's real, it demands action. Some love demands patience. Some love asks you to sit still and become dependable instead of impressive. That was me. I was the guy who fixed her monitor when it flickered, the guy who stayed late the night the quarterly reports crashed, the guy who noticed when she started taking the stairs instead of the elevator, like she needed to feel something physical again. We talked about small things, weather, deadlines, her rescue dog Milo, who chewed through 3 leashes before settling down. We never talked about us. There was no us to talk about. Until the day she noticed me. It was nothing dramatic. Just a Tuesday. Just fluorescent lights and stale air and the sound of keyboards clicking like rain. She stood by my desk longer than usual, not asking for help, not rushing away. "You okay?" she said, eyes soft but direct. I was the one who froze this time, because no one ever asked me that. I said yeah, because that's what quiet men do. She didn't move right away. Just studied me, like she was finally seeing a picture that had always been on the wall, but never quite in focus. Something opened then. Not love, recognition. From that day on, things shifted. Lunches overlapped, conversations lingered. She laughed more around me, and I caught myself talking with my hands, forgetting to hide. For the first time in 20 years, hope did something dangerous. It woke up, and then my body betrayed me. It started with fatigue, the kind sleep doesn't fix, then weight loss I didn't earn. Then a pain under my ribs I kept explaining away because that's what men like me do. We minimize. The diagnosis came on a Thursday afternoon in a beige room that smelled like disinfectant and finality. Stage 4, inoperable. The doctor spoke gently, like volume could soften meaning. Timeline given, treatment discussed. All I could think was that I'd waited 20 years for the wrong season. I went back to work the next week. Didn't tell anyone, especially not her. Claire was glowing again, but this time it wasn't naive. It was warm, intentional. She asked me to lunch, not as co-workers drifting together, as something deliberate. We sat at a diner on Wabash, vinyl booths cracked, coffee refilled without asking. She talked about feeling like she'd been asleep for years, about noticing things she used to rush past. She looked at me when she said it. My chest ached in a way that had nothing to do with cancer. I listened. That was my role. When she reached across the table and touched my hand, it felt like permission arriving too late. I didn't pull away. I didn't lean in. I let the moment exist exactly as it was. Because love had taught me one final lesson. Timing isn't something you earn by being good. Sometimes it just happens. Sometimes it doesn't. And as she smiled at me, hopeful and brave and finally ready, I knew the truth I hadn't said out loud yet was already counting down inside me. This wasn't the beginning. It was the reckoning. I didn't tell her right away. Some truths feel too heavy to hand to someone who's just learned how to breathe again. Claire started finding reasons to be near me, not obvious ones, small, human ones. She'd stop by my desk with an excuse about a formula she already understood. She'd wait for me by the elevator instead of taking the stairs. She laughed at things that weren't funny, like she was practicing joy out loud. And I let it happen, not because I was lying, because I wanted to give her something good before the ground shifted. There's a strange calm that comes after a terminal diagnosis. Not peace, clarity. I noticed everything then. The way Chicago light turned silver just before snow. The sound of her boots on the office tile. The exact shape of her smile when she forgot to guard it. She asked me to dinner a week later. Not casually, not carefully, direct. We ate at a little Italian place in River North, where the tables were too close and the wine came warm. She talked about the past without bitterness, about mistakes she finally forgave herself for. She said my name differently now. Slower. When she reached for my arm while laughing, something inside me cracked open cleanly, not painfully. Honestly, I wanted to tell her everything, how long I'd loved her, how every quiet thing I'd done had been for her, how my time was already measured. Instead, I walked her to her car and stood there while snow started falling like it didn't know how serious this moment was. She leaned in first, just a kiss on the cheek. It felt like a promise and a goodbye. The treatment started in January. Chemo days were long and colorless. I lost weight, then hair, then strength. Claire noticed before anyone else. She always did. "You don't look okay," she said one morning, voice steady but eyes sharp. I smiled because that was the last defense I had. I told her the following Friday, not at the office, not in public. At my apartment, where the walls were bare and the furniture was chosen for function, not future. I didn't dramatize it, didn't soften it. I told her the truth like I'd been telling myself. She didn't cry at first. She just sat very still, like someone trying not to scare an animal away. Then she reached for me, not gently, like she was anchoring me to the world. "I'm here," she said. "No panic, no denial." And that's when I broke. I told her about the 20 years, about watching her live, about choosing silence every day because I thought love meant staying out of the way. She cried then, not loudly, not beautifully, the kind of crying that carries regret and gratitude in the same breath. "You should have told me," she said. I didn't argue. Some truths don't need defending. What we had after that didn't look like a romance people write songs about. No big trips, no dramatic gestures, just presence. She came to appointments, held my hand when the nausea hit, read out loud when my eyes got tired. I watched her become steady in a way she'd never been before. Not because of me, because of herself. We talked about ordinary things, movies we liked, songs that felt like memory, the dog she still worried about more than herself. Sometimes she slept on the couch, sometimes next to me. No expectations, no promises. Love doesn't always need a future to be real. Spring came quietly. I got weaker, she got braver. One afternoon, she asked me if I regretted waiting. I didn't answer right away, because regret wasn't the right word. I told her love doesn't disappear just because it stays silent, that it shaped my life even when no one saw it, that knowing her, loving her quietly, made me better than I would have been otherwise. She pressed her forehead to mine and cried like she finally understood the cost of patience. The end didn't arrive dramatically. No storm, no final speech. Just a Sunday morning with light slipping through the blinds and her hand in mine. I told her she was safe now, that she didn't need to be alone anymore. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't need to. Weeks later, she went back to the office. Same building, same floor. My desk was gone, the carpet still worn where my chair used to be. She stopped by that spot sometimes, not to mourn, to remember. She tells people now that love isn't always loud, that sometimes the deepest devotion sits beside you for years, asking for nothing. And when she smiles, strong, healed, finally ready, I know something important. Love waited too long, but it never left.